All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Mondays Down South. We got a lot to talk about here. We got the usual three. We're coming at you after the divisional round playoffs. Gentlemen, the Washington Commanders are in the NFC Conference Championship. Could not be more pumped after last week's. So we're going to dive into all the games, but I'll pop it over to these gents to give a quick update on how they consume these games and some early thoughts.
You realize we've never echoed those words or said those words in our entire lifetime, right? The Commanders are in the NFC Championship. Like, that is kind of crazy to think about. We've existed on this earth for 31 years, each of us, or at least 30 years, and we have never said that. That is all I could take away from that. Obviously, we'll talk about the other games, and they were amazing, and amazing weekend of football. I was in Louisiana. I was with family friends. We watched every game together. We had a blast. I even watched the Texans game with Trey and Shrieker, who are huge Texans fans. So we have a ton to talk about there. But I just want to congratulate you first, Evan, and obviously, Zach and I were wrong, but this isn't even about right or wrong for me. This is about, I can't even imagine how good you feel right now. You've been watching them through thick and thin through everything. No matter what happens this game, this is about as impressive as the first year for Jaden Daniels as you could hope for. So I'm just going to say that and let Zach go from there.
And like Sai mentioned, Evan, congratulations. But more importantly, you were right, we were wrong, and we can kind of move forward. Like Sai said, we don't know flaming needs to occur. I hate how I go straight to selfishness with like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get flamed here on this whole episode. There better not be a complete torch fest going on. But I was wrong about every single game, practically. I think I was right about Kansas City, but that's it. They barely covered. But yeah, congratulations, Evan. I know we're going to get into it. I know it's going to get juicy because Evan is going to be swinging for the fences today, and he has every right. So I'll kick it back to the man of the hour.
Luckily, thank you, gents, first of all. But yeah, honestly, surreal. Like I don't even know how to feel. This is just like such an unusual feeling to not even ever be close to this point. Luckily, Zach, I have plenty more receipts to cash, and you're nowhere near the top of that list. So, and Sai, you actually were pretty accurate. You said the only way I see the Commanders winning is if Jared Goff chokes, and that's not too far off what happened. So, yeah, I guess should we dive into the game itself, or do we want to start with some of the others? What do we want to do here?
I think we start Commanders, and I do want to say this. I think that, I think you should take the floor for the most part with the analysis, but I'll provide this. I think that was the number one thing. Jared Goff looked like the rookie, and Jaden Daniels looked like the veteran. That was the difference for me that game. I think what me and Zach were completely wrong about was giving the Detroit Lions defense too much credit with all the injuries they had. Obviously, the version of this team from earlier in the year before they lost like half their starting defenders was way different, and I think that was a team that might have been more menacing. But I think I gave this version of their defense a bit too much credit. And I want to start with this. It doesn't matter about how good or bad the Commanders' defense was because you guys managed to win that game. But overall, on both sides, the defense was actually probably horrendous in terms of what we saw. But the difference was turnovers, and that's where I was talking about Jaden Daniels and Jared Goff earlier. Jaden was throwing dots left and right. He didn't even come close to turning the ball over like the entire game. He was just so accurate and so smart about passing the ball. And Jared Goff, along with Jameson Williams, were making decisions where I was like, why would you ever throw that ball there? Or like, why would you throw that ball? It was just mind-boggling to me, especially in Detroit, for them to make those mistakes and to have been there before and to make those mistakes was shocking to me. The number one takeaway for me is they just purely got outplayed by the Commanders in their own house. And it has nothing to do, and it's embarrassing too, because you could argue that they're the more talented team and you let them walk into your house and absolutely own you. And it was stupid mistakes. It was like the fumble within 20 yards. One of those picks he threw on his side of the field was just dumb. The fact they couldn't hold on to a football, it was just crazy. All things considered, it was honestly not even close. The one thing that's blew my mind though is your analysis was I know you said, Evan, that if the Commanders won this game, it was going to be because they're going to have long sustained drives where they would be holding onto the ball a lot, where the Detroit offense wouldn't get the ball a lot. What actually benefited you was not having too many of those and letting Jared Goff get the ball a lot. And he just kept giving it back to you in great opportune situations where Jaden could then go convert for a touchdown, and that did it. So I'm going to leave it at that. And Zach, go ahead, and then I'm sure we'll let Evan close this one.
Yeah, I'll just give my minute spiel because I'm really curious to get Evan's full analysis on this game. You guys are in the NFC Championship.
Crazy.
Dude, I hope that has resonated because that is unbelievable. What an accomplishment. I tip the cap. I truly do. You have deserved this, man. You've been a Washington fan for life. It seems like all the pieces of the puzzle are starting to fit together. Terry McLaurin had one of the most epic pregame speeches. I would encourage you guys to listen to it if you hadn't already. And Jaden Daniels, in his pre and post game is, are you going to be nervous? And it aligns exactly to what Evan said. He's not going to be rocked by the environment. He responded to the question. He goes, I don't know. Like that means he's not even rattled in the slightest. He is a textbook football player. Hats off to the Washington Commanders. And here's what I will say. Jameson Williams, Amon St. Brown, and Jahmyr Gibbs all had a day. And that was going to be the big key, right? How was Washington going to corral those players? But all of those players, they're studs. They contributed greatly to the reason why the Detroit Lions were the first seed in the first place. They were going to have their touches. They were going to do their thing. But Washington never quit. They never quit, and Jaden was precise. I mean, he was throwing darts all game long. So DQ's leadership in this team is going to be a scary, scary team to play this Sunday. So really looking forward to it. But Ev, I'll kick it over to you, and I just want to hear everything, all your thoughts, anxieties, and successes throughout the whole game.
I know. I'm trying to organize my thoughts as best as possible, but I honestly think the Commanders were just more prepared. Like I said a lot of things last week, and like small little elements of, there's no such thing as a trap game in the playoffs, but that's exactly what this felt. You had two coordinators, both of which were interviewing all last week for jobs. One of them, I can guarantee you that Ben Johnson had already verbally agreed to a job with the Bears by the time he was playing that game. He was already out the door. And I think it showed with some of his play calling. I mean, some of his trick plays were absolutely spot on. Classic Ben Johnson, just absolute brilliance from him. But like the Jameson Williams play, he put the ball in Goff's hands way too much. Like he kind of almost abandoned the run at times, which is crazy with how effective it was. And then I thought Aaron Glenn was a disaster on the defensive side. I mean, obviously it's really hard to play against Jaden when he's playing like that. But first half, he played a little bit more zone and they couldn't generate pressure. So Jaden just picked it apart. And then the second half, he does what he always does, which is basically just blitzes the entire game. And if he just texted me before the game, I would have told him that you can't blitz Jaden Daniels and Cliff Kingsbury because they get the ball out so quick. They move the line. It's like the last thing you want to do against this guy. So he just picked them apart in the second half. So I think Cliff Kingsbury, fantastic game with the exception of the QB sneak early on. I don't know what that was about, but overall was tremendous. And Joe Wade as well. Commanders play a lot of man, and in this game, the Lions will destroy man coverage. So they basically played zone the entire game. And I thought the secondary was terrific. Marshawn Lattimore was awesome. You didn't hear his name a single time. Obviously, the big picks, Mikey Samer still, one of them was a gimme from Jameson, but that play to undercut the Jameson Williams, touchdown play. I mean, obviously Goff probably should have put a little more air on it, but that's just a terrific play from the rookie to undercut that. He had that thing covered the entire way, and then he just cuts underneath it. I thought that was brilliant. And then early in the game, the defensive line, Dorrance Armstrong with the strip. I think that's the play of the game. You go down 14-3 on the road against this team, you might get buried. So to be able to come up with that strip sack is huge. And shout out our boy Jonathan Allen, too, Stonebridge alum. Torn pec, which is usually like easily season-ending injury, bleeding into the offseason. The dude comes back and has probably his best game of the season. So I think he deserves a lot of credit with the rest of the offensive line. What else do I got on my notes? And back to Aaron Glenn. I think one of the biggest plays in this game where the Lions had a chance to come back down 3, 4th and 2. The Commanders choose to go for it there in late third, early fourth quarter. And the Commanders line up in, I guess not I formation, but under center. And as someone that watches this team every week, they rarely line up under center. And when they do it on 4th down and short, it means that Jaden is going to do a courtesy fake and he's going to speed out. It's their most commonly run fourth down play. I've seen it every time. The second I saw the formation, I knew what the play was. So let me ask Aaron Glenn how he was not prepared for that. Right? Like, to me, it was just unacceptable that they were not prepared for that. I'm glad they weren't, but you could also blame the rookie. It looked like the rookie corner just lost contain. Yeah. So, like, player execution, sure, but that's also on the coaching to not have them ready to go for that play, which for me, no one's ever stopped it. But still, for me, like, I knew the second that they lined up in that formation what play was coming, and I don't know. I just thought they got out coached. And shout out to the team, Jaden. Nothing surprises me with that guy, and a couple other receipts I'll bury is just a lot of their fans. I think, again, trap game element. You can't tell me this doesn't bleed into the players. Like, Nick Saban calls it rat poison, but like, they hear all this. And I'm going to shout out one of their podcasts. I actually forget the name of their podcast. This guy doesn't have a lot of credibility, but I am going to bury him right now. He said that he hopes that if Jaden Daniels runs the ball for 15 times in this game, he will be in the medical tent at least once. That did not happen, but you know who did have to go to the medical tent before throwing a pick six? His own quarterback, Jared Goff. And he suggested that the Lions players intentionally try to injure Jaden Daniels, even if it requires a flag. So tip the cap to you. He also went on a 2-minute rant about how the Commanders have absolutely zero chance in this game. So I hope he's having a good week, but that's one receipt I'm going to cash. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown's my other receipt I'm going to cash in. Now, granted, he was completely right on his take on being better than Dyami Brown, obviously, but I do think there's some beautiful irony in him, just completely criticizing Dyami Brown 2 years ago when they played, and Dyami Brown eliminates from in the playoffs with a 6-catch, 80-yard performance or whatever it was. Just a terrific game from him. Obviously, Amon-Ra is a way better player, and he ultimately is right in this, but I think there's some beautiful irony in that. So, honestly, just love all these little pieces of this, like, kind of little matchup that played out like this, and just couldn't say more about this team.
And you know what the difference is when Dyami Brown had his 80 yards and his multiple receptions, he didn't get up and he didn't do this. It's ridiculous. These players have become prima donnas. I'll give Jahmyr Gibbs a pass because he's a dog and he kind of like follows, like he's like the little brother, and big brother is Amon St. Brown, who kind of leads the charge there. But his successes have gone to his head so much, where Amon St. Brown was doing this celebration down like 13 or 7 or 10 or 13 points late in the third quarter. It's like, you shouldn't be doing any celebration when you get a catch until you get a touchdown, because Washington's dunking on you right now and they have 40. So, like, you got to be careful there. And I also thought that Saren still, when he when he had the pick six and he motioned all the Washington Commanders players, like defensive players, Frankie Louvu and company, and then they did the Amon St. Brown dance at the Pistons game. Do you guys remember that? Where
I didn't know
like this. When they did,
I didn't catch that.
That was him making fun of, like, egregiously Amon St. Brown and Jahmyr Gibbs for all of their childish antics that are not team first.
I actually completely disagree with you, Zach. I think that's a ridiculous take. Maybe Jameson Williams, I can agree with you more. Amon-Ra St. Brown, like, maybe he talks a smack or whatever. He is such a team player and he is such a dog. I have no problem with him whatsoever. As a matter of fact, he's one of my favorite players in the league because he will put his body on the line. Whether he's injured, whether he's not, he will put himself out there and take big hits, run across the middle of the field, take a massive hit from like the big safeties and linebackers, get back up and do it again. So I'm not going to fault him for it. I understand maybe it could be a bit over the top, but how can we call him a prima donna when I mean, obviously Terry McLaurin isn't, but there's a bunch of other receivers in the league who are way more selfish. I don't think Amon-Ra St. Brown is
just
selfish.
Because other players are selfish doesn't mean he isn't. And every receiver is expected to put their body on the line. Terry McLaurin didn't. When he had that 60-yard screen pass touchdown, he went straight back to the sideline.
I completely disagree with you that he's selfish. That's in my mind, that might be one of your worst takes ever. I'm not trying to be a hater, but I really think it is. Like, I followed this man from the day he stepped in the NFL, and all he's ever done is elevate and prove that he's elite in a position where people didn't think he was going to be. And if there's a reason the Lions have been as good as they are the last couple of years, it's not Jared Goff. The run game's good. Ben Johnson's great. But that team does not succeed without Amon-Ra St. Brown. And it's not like he went out there and had a bad game. The guy cooked. He's a dog. But I don't want to take a game where the Commanders deserve the credit and take credit away from one of the best receivers and one of the best players in the NFL. That's all I'm saying. Like, he's not the one I'm blaming. I blame guys like Jameson Williams, who still had a great game, but, like, we were talking about offensive coordinator and defensive coordinating. I don't care Like normally coaching is the thing I focus on the most. That's usually where my takes are. This game, in my mind, had not I shouldn't say nothing. It had less to do with the coaching and more to do with the players, in my opinion, because I'm not blaming Ben Johnson, and honestly, I'm not blaming Aaron Glenn as much as I am the players out there. Like, maybe Evan is right. Maybe they had their distractions with the coaching interviews and stuff they were having. I don't disagree with that. I 100% agree that Ben Johnson probably agreed a week ago that he was going to be the Bears. Like, he signed immediately after. My point, though, is Jared Goff making those turnovers is not Ben Johnson's fault, and Jameson Williams choosing to throw that ball is not Ben Johnson's fault. When you call that play and he has that ball in his hand, you need to just throw the ball away. And I know they told him that. I know they coached him on that. But I think he just got a bit too cocky. He was feeling a little too good after he scored a touchdown and was about to get penalized until Jahmyr Gibbs decided, hey, man, that was one thrust too many. Maybe don't do that. And went and stopped him from thrusting even more. And not getting a 15-yard penalty. And then on the Aaron Glenn side, I'm not saying he coached a good game. I'm not trying to defend him in any way. But when you were talking about that 4th and 2, Jaden keeping the ball, I literally sat there. I'm not a Commanders fan, but I sat there and I said, Jaden is going to fake this ball and he's going to roll out. We knew that. I know Aaron Glenn told his defense that. That is 100% on those linebackers and corners somehow choosing not have a single one of them follow Jaden. That's on them. Like, that is the middle linebacker in that play or your safety, whoever the leader of that defense is, needs to communicate, hey, I got him, or hey, we got him. And that clearly didn't happen. I just think, like, defensively, this was such a bad game, and it was embarrassing to see. I respect the big plays the Commanders made, like in terms of turnovers. That was the difference. But the Lions on offense, for the most part, outside of Goff making awful decisions, were doing what they wanted to do, and vice versa. The Commanders were doing whatever they wanted to do. This game had less to do with coaching than any playoff game I've watched all weekend, and had way more to do with decision making. And ultimately, that is why Jaden Daniels is already on trajectory to be, this elite quarterback. It's because as a rookie, he went out and had the greatest rookie year I've ever seen. And the biggest thing about that is, for someone who's as dynamic as he is, his decision making is on a level that feels like he's been playing for a decade. And that is what changed this game, in my opinion.
Yeah, the one I do agree on Amon-Ra being, like, generally speaking, pretty unselfish, but the point that I think Zach was kind of getting towards that I do agree with is, like, it's almost like just the professionalism of these two teams and how they approach this game. Like, the Lions are a team that aren't used to this situation, right? They were like looking forward to an NFC Conference Championship, and they were thinking about so many other things, kind of like I alluded to. And it's just like, it's the fact that Jahmyr Gibbs took 15, 20 minutes out of his week to memorize Kevin Durant's celebration, knowing he's a Commanders fan and using it on the first touchdown. It's those little things that they did that took time away from their preparation. It's Amon-Ra St. Brown painting his hair blue. I know he does it every year, but it's like these types of things that just, they kind of, and the command, like, did you just tell me that the Commanders were way more professional about their approach? And it's probably because of guys like Bobby Wagner that have been there before, Zach Ertz, Austin Eckler, like these veterans that, like, there was just not an ounce of anything but focus and, like, business-like mentality about this game from them, and Dan Quinn as well, having been to a Super Bowl. Like, and I kind of think it comes down to that, because, like Cy mentioned earlier, I think, shout out Zach Klein, he sent me a funny text this week, and it's hard to disagree with him, but if you lined up 1-for-1 every player on each team's offense, like, you're probably taking the Lions guy in 10 out of 11 with the exception of quarterback, right? I mean, I can't speak to every individual offensive lineman, and our best offensive lineman left this game, so it just, it comes down to quarterback, and I do disagree about the coaching. Like, I think just the mentality that was set from the top, and, like, I think the Commanders' positional coaches did outcoach them. So I think that's what it came down to for me. And, like, Jaden, I almost don't even want to talk about it, because, anyone that's surprised by how he played in that game just hasn't been watching him all year. Like, I've never seen someone so unbothered by it all before in my life at such a young age. Like, he honestly is unbelievable, and we know the skills he has on the field. So
I do have a quick point to what you said, though. You're not wrong that obviously they took their time, and I think a lot of NFL players are, try to celebrate and make the time for it. I think in a way that's probably a good thing, though, because you can't spend 24/7 every day focusing all your energy on game, where you're going to drive yourself insane and probably overthink it. But that's not an excuse. What I'm going to point to, though, is the two guys you pointed to, Jahmyr Gibbs and Amon-Ra St. Brown, both scored and had great games. So it's not like them taking the time to do that took away from them playing to the level that they needed to play to. That's all I'm pointing out. My point is the issue wasn't with the skill position players because they did their job on offense. The issue was Jared Goff and the Lions defense not being able to stop a fly. Like, at no point did I think they were going to stop him. And my thing with Aaron Glenn is maybe he could have had a better game plan, but I just truly believe this personnel just got absolutely outclassed by the Commanders' offense. I just don't think they were going to stop him. Like, Jaden's versatility of being able to scramble was something they couldn't handle. Branch is probably the only player on that defense that would scare me in any way, and he had way too much responsibility given the fact that they had no pass rush with all the guys hurt and no great linebacker play. It's when you think of it in the grand scheme of things, it makes me feel dumb because I think I just gave this defense more credit than they deserve because of scheming and whatever else. But at a certain point, when your personnel is not good enough, it's not good enough. And we'll talk about this more in future games, but this is how I feel about other outcomes that we saw this weekend. But yeah, you're probably right. I mean, I was over-exaggerating when I was talking about coaching. One other thing that I was a little bit annoyed with was Ben Johnson did have some great play calls early on, but at a point where Jared Goff finally got his confidence back and they were throwing the ball all over you guys, I don't know why they started getting tricky with it again. Clearly, your secondary was not covering these guys. Just keep throwing the ball down the field, and you're not gonna like keep the momentum going. And that's when they ran that JMO trick play, and he made the mistake. Like, they were shredding you guys. I was like, why would you stop? Like, and it slows the offense down. Like, you just want to keep the momentum going. So sometimes I do think he was overthinking it, but I mean, he was an exceptional coordinator all year long, though. And just with his time with the Lions, the Bears got a great one. I think he's going to do big things there. And he got Dennis Allen as his defensive coordinator, not to switch topics, but that's quite the coaching unit to build around with the talent they have. So.
Yeah, my last point before we wrap on this game is like Jaden Daniels is at that level of quarterback that the only way to be able to stop him is if you can rush the passer with just four guys. It's like Mahomes. You can't just sit back on Mahomes. He'll pick you apart. You can't blitz Mahomes. It's like, same with Josh Allen, same with Lamar. And Jaden's at that level where it's like, Burrow too. It's like, that's the only way you can beat these elite quarterbacks. And he's in that tier of, you got to be able to rush with four. Otherwise you're, pick your poison, but you're going to get beat usually.
He really is in that upper echelon. I like what Sai said. He's the best rookie quarterback ever. I don't think there's one rookie quarterback that is at a better season than Jaden Daniels, and he's a Washington Commander. He's going to be a Commander for a long time. Switching gears to the other NFC game, we have the Philadelphia Eagles playing against the Los Angeles Rams. This game was a lot more of a domination fest, in my opinion, than what the score projected. I thought there was a clear difference in talent, and I thought that Philly controlled the game at all times. So even though it was a 6-point game by the end of it, there's a couple of botched. There was a botched field goal, botched extra point, or 2 extra point botches. I think that Philadelphia dominated the game from the line of scrimmage. They have probably the best defense out of the Final Four, with a lot of their guys coming back healthy. Their secondary is playing out, absolutely insane. Hopefully Mitchell can come back from that injury. He was questionable for the rest of the game, and then their front four. But more importantly, the critique I'm seeing on Philadelphia's side is Jalen Hurts cannot throw for over 150 yards. I'm sick of a Philadelphia Eagles win when Jalen Hurts has high school stats. But my counter argument against that is if you cannot stop them on the run with that elite offensive line, you're going to have problems for the rest of the game. You have Jalen Hurts going on a 40-yard touchdown. You have Saquon Barkley scampering for a 50 and a 75-yard touchdown. These guys were just playing with their food all game. And despite the fact that it was one position, when it was all said and done, and there were a couple of nervous moments there at the end, I felt like Philly, for the most part, had this game well under control, and they looked dominant. So what are y'all's thoughts?
I'll let Evan go last because I get the feeling I know which direction he's going to go. I actually kind of disagree with that. I think I agree with you that talent-wise, the Rams or the Eagles are significantly better. There's no denying that. But what I disagree about is, given the amount of talent you have, given the fact that you're at home, and given the fact that it's a snow game, which you should be more accustomed to than a team from LA, that game was way too close for comfort for a team that has all those things going for them. The Rams closed that gap a lot quicker than I thought. And Stafford was this close to winning that game. And part of that issue was the mistakes they make. That's the biggest issue with the Eagles. It's not that they don't have the talent or the personnel. It's that they find a way to make things closer than they should sometimes. And that was kind of where I was actually like impressed by the Rams. The difference in this game was Saquon Barkley. I mean, it's the difference that's been there all year for the Eagles. He has been that Mr. Reliable. Whenever they need that big play, he breaks it. And I'm ready to say he's the best running back in the NFL. I don't, even with Christian McCaffrey, all those guys, I don't care. He is the best running back in the NFL. It's about time people acknowledge that. And he keeps proving it in big moments. If it wasn't for him making that massive run at the end, the Rams win that game. It's just unfair how good that guy is. But putting that aside, I think the Rams did about as good as they could going on the road in a snow game and almost beating Philly in Philly. And I think I put that more on Philly not being able to execute as well as I think that they should be able to execute if they're going to go win a Super Bowl. Now, as far as what I think is going to happen next, I'll save that for later. But my opinion is that I don't think it was that much of a blowout, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. Like, it felt like Philly was. It didn't really ever until like the last play of the game arguably feel like Philly was going to lose. But I do disagree that they were dominating them. I thought it was completely even. I would say the difference in the game was the 2 turnovers. Pretty much every single one of these divisional round games came down to the turnovers. The Rams had 2, the Eagles had nothing. That was basically it. I think, and I want to preface this before I say this because I'll catch a lot of hate for it. The Eagles deserve to be at home because they had such a dominant season. So this is not me trying to like create some kind of firestorm, but certainly if this game was played in LA, I think the Rams would have won. And even if this game was in Philly, but the weather was better, like if there was no snow, even if the weather was like the sleet that was played in like more of the first half, the first quarter, I think the Rams win this game. I mean, the 2 turnovers were completely, well, the first was the second on Kyron was a nice punch, but the Stafford one was 100% just because of the snow. I mean, the ball just flew out of his hands. And I just think the huge advantage in the snow goes to the team with the better offensive line that can run the ball. So it's a huge advantage to Saquon. I agree with, like, Saquon's obviously just unbelievable. So like him popping those runs is crazy, but like I firmly believe if the weather was better, the Rams would win this game. The Rams defense had 7 sacks. They were terrific. And even so, they almost won. If it wasn't for a missed assignment on Jalen Carter there on the last play, I don't know if you guys saw the all 22 on that play, but there was a wide open receiver because the defender fell down, and it was going to be a game-winning touchdown there if the offensive lineman, the center, thought he was handing him off to the guard, but the guard didn't realize, and Jalen Carter got a free sack on Stafford that basically ended the game. But there was a wide open receiver that was going to score a touchdown on that play, and the Rams would have won. I was queuing up Matthew Stafford is a no-doubt Hall of Famer takes if he pulled that off, man, and potentially got to the Super Bowl. That was an unbelievable 3 minutes from them in the snow to be able to put almost 2 touchdown drives together. I don't know what happened to the Eagles defense, but they just kind of like completely let the foot off the gas when Kevin Smith, shout out him, said, "We will see you next week" after the second Barkley touchdown, and they almost lost the football game. And I think a lot of Eagles fans had put it in the bag, as did the announcers. They thought the game was done, and it almost was not. But I firmly believe the Rams would have won that game in better conditions, which is, again, is no knock on the Eagles. They earned home field. They deserved it. And I do not think, like Kurt Warner thinks, that these should be neutral site games, which is an insane thing to say. It just is what it is, that the team that plays in harsher conditions gets an advantage this time of year. It just kind of is how it fumbles, kind of like Cy said. But yeah, I do not think that Eagles were necessarily the better team. I think they just got an advantage with the weather.
I think that's a fair point. I mean, I feel like we've been analyzed this one enough. I think it's pretty straightforward. But I do want to say one last thing. Matt Stafford is a no doubt Hall of Famer. I don't care if he won this game or not. He got his Super Bowl, and he's proven for the better part of 15 years that he is an elite game caller and just an amazing player. So for him to be as old as he is and go do that, it's just impressive. So we'll jump to, I think we'll go Chiefs Texans. I think we saved the Ravens Bills for last because that one was an epic ending. Chiefs Texans. I'll start. I mean, you guys know what my analysis is going to be. I just want to go on a quick rant on people's hatred towards the Chiefs. I recognize that they I'm not going to pretend like they don't get calls. They did. Like that first roughing the passer was definitely just a bad call on Will Anderson, right? Like you don't call that play when he hits him in the chest or whatever it is. Like ridiculous call. Definitely not a good call. And I can understand if I'm a Texans fan or if I'm not a Chiefs fan, I'm rooting for the other team, why that would be frustrating. And especially as a Texans fan, you're in a playoff game and it's already hard enough to win that game going into Kansas City and trying to beat Mahomes and the Chiefs in their house. But what gets me is when people watch these games and they spend all their time on the play calls, but don't want to acknowledge when the better team, and clearly the better team, won that game. And that is what's pissing me off because I have not people like Sharon Trigger who are a bit more rational, but I have a bunch of other Texans fans that I know complaining about the calls to this moment, acting like, oh, if that call went our way, we win this game. And I'm like, no, the reason you don't win this game is because your offensive line versus Eric Spagnuolo and that Kansas City defense, which I disagree with Zach. That is the best defense in the NFL. And not because of personnel. I think the Eagles have more personnel, but because you pair that personnel with the perfect defensive coordinator for that situation. And the Chiefs do what the Chiefs do. They started the game slow, picking up momentum as they go along, keeping it a close game. And then in the second half, they unleashed. And Eric Spagnuolo started sending blitz packages from different directions and every which way. The offensive line couldn't block anyone. By the time C.J. Stroud had the ball, a guy was in his face pretty much the entire second half, and especially in the fourth quarter. And in the meanwhile, against an elite Texans defense, which we just talked about last week, Mahomes slowly but surely picked up steam. And then Travis Kelce does what Travis Kelce always does. Even though he's older, one thing he never gets enough credit for is his intelligence. He's such a smart player. If you start running zone coverage on him or you try to put man-to-man with a linebacker against him, him and Mahomes have this chemistry. They have this elite chemistry where he will just start slipping under in any which direction. And Mahomes feels it, reads it, throws it immediately. And he picked apart their defense the entire second half. They couldn't stop Kelce. So I'm just so tired of people acting like this game came down to a roughing the passer call when the reality is you just got outplayed and you weren't even on the same stratosphere as them in terms of talent. They completely destroyed you. And this game honestly looked closer than it was box score wise. I would argue this is the game that didn't look close at all. The team you played was just better. And that's not even a knock against the Texans. It's you just have to admit that Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs at their house are just better. And I think people who watch football and analyze that can recognize that. But I'm just tired of the whole world being like, oh, the Chiefs only win because they get lucky or they get the calls. That's just ridiculous, man. Watch football. That's all I got to say about that.
All right, so let me jump in here. I agree with everything you're saying, Cy, in regards to the fact that the Houston Texans are worse than the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs were dominant. I like the way you mentioned it. Right, they start to pull away to an immediate lead. A couple back-to-back field goals. They had a nice kick return to start the game off, and then they unleash in the second half. And Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes in playoff mode are crazy. They're crazy good. Here's where I have concerns. I have concerns that this is going to continue to play forward with the friendly officiating towards the Mahomes style of play in the Bills game. Because I look at two completely different quarterbacks. I have one in Josh Allen who wills his team to victory with a limited, talented roster around him and was responsible for 2 or 3 rushing touchdowns in the game that we're going to talk about here shortly after. And then I have Mahomes throwing a fit on the sideline and flopping towards the sideline to try to get a hometown call, knowing he's playing in Arrowhead Stadium with a referee, by the way, that is 7-0 officiating Chiefs games. All right. I just see two different types of players, and it's very frustrating to me that Mahomes plays with this style where he runs around, trying to make a play so he can be like a top highlight on SportsCenter, but then he starts throwing his hands up when he gets hit. If you're beyond the line of scrimmage and you're dancing around like you're an acrobat in Rio de Janeiro, you're going to get hit. And when you run towards the sidelines and you fling your hands up like this for a flop, it's just very distasteful in my opinion. And all credit to the Chiefs. Like you said, they did win that game and they deserved it. But my fear with the officiating style is that I hope that Josh Allen gets some of the same exact calls that Patrick Mahomes does. Josh Allen never looks for those calls because the Bills don't play that way. That's my thought process.
Yeah, I agree with both of you 100%. Obviously, this game did not come down to those calls. The Chiefs dominated them, as I think everyone expected them to. These teams are not on the same, the same level. Completely agree with Cy. I completely agree about Pat Mahomes, though. That flop on the sideline is so egregious and so bad for the game. The way he's baiting these officials, like, honestly, is kind of disgusting. Like, it's like he slows down as he approaches the sideline, knowing, that if he gets hit, it's going to get an obvious call. And in this case, he gets touched. He throws his hands up, like, falls down when he did not need to fall. Like, it is so bad for the game. And my take about the Chiefs, which is obviously mainly a compliment, but they are following the Patriots arc to a T, and Mahomes is following the Brady arc to a T, like with how their team now is like they can't, necessarily afford all the weapons the same way. So they win with their defense. The quarterback is just perfect situationally and doesn't make mistakes. And now Mahomes is turning into the next Brady that just gets all the calls anytime he gets hit, and he milks it for everything he's worth. And that's why the Chiefs are going to be hated like the Patriots are going to be, for better or for worse. And they do it on purpose, as Brady did on purpose, because it gives them another edge and allows them to be fired up even when they basically dominate the league every year. So they need that little extra edge. So these franchises are the exact same to me, and I don't mean that as necessarily a negative, although I think, like, Pat is doing this to a level that's way more egregious than Brady ever did. Like, if he keeps making flops like that on the sideline, I mean, I know this is maybe kind of a one-off. He does it to an extent. This was the worst one I've seen from him, but that was bad, man. Like, you can't be doing that. And, like,
I 100% agree about the flop, though. As much of a Mahomes fan as I am, like, I don't like seeing that. I don't like seeing it in any game. Like, I'm a big LeBron James fan, but when he does it, I get really irritated too. Like, I don't love to see that. I think some part of it is them trying to be like, oh, I'm going to be intelligent and try to, like, get every edge that I can, but it's still not something I like to see. I don't think this is like that one specifically. I think a lot of players flop, but that one specifically was egregious, as you mentioned. I don't think he does that all the time, though. I'm not going to act like that's his norm. I also think that the second hit, yeah, maybe it was a lighter slide, the one that they called the rough in the passer on, but the thing that I don't understand, or the illegal contact or whatever it was, a personal foul with the 15-yard penalty. I don't think that was on Mahomes with like, obviously he slid. I get that, but the first one, it's not like he tried to draw it. They just called a bad call. The second one, they're calling it a late slide. He got a 15-yard. I don't know if was it rough in the passer, or was it what's the other one that it's called?
It was like a personal foul, like
personal foul, something,
helmet to helmet or something.
Helmet to helmet. The guy led with his helmet. So even if Pat Mahomes didn't slide, he would have hit him with his helmet. That part, I was getting a bit annoyed by people being like, oh, that wasn't a foul. I was like, any quarterback in the NFL, if they slide there, they're calling that foul. So put that aside. One thing I will say, though, is going forward, I agree with you, Zach. I hope it's not an issue. I don't want them to call those, because I don't want people to keep thinking that the reason the Chiefs are winning these games, or the reason Mahomes wins these games, is just because the refs are on their side. The guy is 16-2 in the playoffs. You know how many people can name, how many people in the NFL or quarterbacks in the NFL have beaten Patrick Mahomes? Can you name them? It's Joe Burrow. That's it. Tom Brady's already retired. It's ridiculous how good he's been. And it's not just because he's had the refs on his side his entire career. And I don't want that to be the narrative too. So I hope he stops flopping, and I hope they stop making those calls, because I still think the Chiefs will win. And you made a point earlier, Zach, about Josh Allen willing his team to victories because he doesn't have as many good players around him. One thing people seem to keep forgetting is Patrick Mahomes for the last 2 years has not had a great offense around him, at least in terms of receivers. He's had Kelsey, no doubt, but Kelsey is old, and he's managing to be creative and find ways to make it work. He's still better than what Buffalo has. But did you see what the receivers did for Kansas City this week, or even last week? I'll answer that question for you. They did absolutely nothing. Like, you basically could have put the three of us as their receivers and had us run streaks down the field, and it wouldn't have changed anything for them, because they did nothing for him. He still managed to win that game against an elite defense. So I'm just tired of, like, I don't want those calls either, Zach. I'm with you. I hope they don't be too friendly to him. I want to see a great game next week. We'll talk about that later. Maybe we jump to Bills Ravens, because you want to talk about great games. Now, that was a great game. I'll let you guys start this one.
Ed, you want to kick it off?
Yeah, just quickly I do think there's this odd narrative going around that, like, the Bills have, like, zero talent on offense. And, like, they don't have big star name players, but, like, they have arguably the best, maybe like the third best offensive line in football, like best left tackle in football. They've been tremendous. James Cook is a stud, and they have, like, 6 solid receiver weapons, including the tight ends, right? So they're not like star players, but they like, it was this whole thing with the Ravens and the MVP voting. Like the Ravens also have really like not that many anybody, especially with Zay Flowers out. But anyway, yeah, this game was it wasn't quite as exciting as I think the Rams Eagles game, mainly because of the snow, but it was just, I mean, a great football game all around. Bills punched them in the mouth early. The Ravens got Derrick Henry going, and I think by the end of the game, it felt like the Ravens were the better team. But again, it came down to the turnovers. Lamar Jackson, two bad turnovers earlier in the game. I mean, the interception and a little bit of miscommunication, but ultimately that's not. It was, I think he said after the game it was on him for not understanding the route concept and the defense as well. The fumble was really bad. Like obviously you got to secure the ball, difficult conditions, but you got to secure the ball. Mark Andrews, you know, as they were starting to really get back in that game and control it, he just gets an easy one slapped out of his hands for a fumble. Like I said, every single game in this divisional round came down to turnovers, and that was the difference. By the end of the game, I think Ravens fans would probably tell you they felt like they were the better team. I'm not sure I'm going to even disagree with them, the way they were controlling that second half. But the Bills, with the home field advantage and the conditions, they're starting to figure out how to play more like the Chiefs, which is where you maybe can see them getting over that hump, where they just do not really make mistakes anymore. And Josh Allen, a rare game where he just had to game manage and he didn't have to be Superman. And they were able to get just enough to get it done. And then quickly, my last take is I love Lamar. I'm not trying to be like overly critical on Lamar, but I want him to get the same like media kind of narrative and bashing that Josh Allen gets. Because Lamar, those two turnovers really cost him the game. And ultimately, I thought Lamar was spectacular for most of this game, don't get me wrong. And then the Mark Andrews play. Obviously, Mark Andrews is getting completely buried to the point where I'm like worried about his well-being because I'm sure he's getting crazy death threats and things like that. And it's honestly very sad. But I would argue that 2-point conversion was a worse throw than it was a worse catch. Like, that was, like, if not, it was almost even. Like, obviously, it 100% should have been caught. It should have been a 2-point conversion. But Lamar was late. He double clutched. It was low. He didn't lead him. He threw it like a little lawn dart, like, which is very awkward for a receiver to catch. And like, no one's talking about the fact that was not a good throw from Lamar either. So I just want to point that out. And like, you know, he seems to be very immune from a lot of the criticism that if Josh Allen made that bad of a throw, like, we'd be talking about it for the next year. So.
Yeah, Zach, go ahead. I'll go last on this one.
Yeah, I one thing I find fascinating is, and I agree with this, is I do think that the Ravens were showing that they were the better team all along. They had the better roster and it was more in sync in the second half. But what I find very interesting about the Bills is they're just a machine. And the Ravens kind of requires a little bit of improvisation from Lamar, and that's what makes him a star. But when you have a lot of improvisation from the, you know, who I think is the MVP runner-up, you take a lot of the systematic, just like the ebbs and flows of a working offense out of the equation. So one of the biggest criticisms from the Ravens was that they abandoned the run game for periods of time. They finally got Derrick Henry going in the third quarter, and he had like 60 yards in the third quarter. I mean, you know, with that, you know, you're averaging 200 yards a game if you were to do that, you know, throughout the entire cycle. But they really weren't able to get him going in the first or second. They completely abandoned it in the fourth quarter. So that leads to improvisation. But what happened in the first and second quarter? They got smacked in the mouth because the Bills were a machine through and throughout. They didn't really deviate from their play calling, and they allowed Josh Allen to improvise, but within a structured environment. He doesn't just sit back there and like dance around the field. He makes decisions a lot more quickly. And I do think that's why he's a worthy MVP candidate. And in this particular case, they did just enough in the first half to, like Evan had mentioned, kind of fall back more into a game manager role. And they were able to squeeze this one out. But I do think that the Ravens were the better team, and they certainly they controlled the game clock in the second half, but the Bills did just enough. And I actually do think that the Bills have a better recipe with this this offensive mechanics style to beat the Chiefs than the Ravens do, because the Ravens are too chaotic and too improvisational that I think they're going to struggle with the Chiefs like they did last year in the playoffs.
Yeah, I'll say this. I don't disagree with the fact that you know, the Bills are a well-oiled machine. I don't disagree with that. The part that I struggle with though is I think from the Ravens' perspective, First of all, I agree. I don't understand why Derrick Henry didn't get the ball more that game. Like maybe there was some plan of like, oh, we're just gonna save him and beat the defense up in the second half. But this is a playoff game. Like I am running Derrick Henry as much as I can, along with the fact that you have the dual threat ability of Lamar Jackson. And the thing with Lamar is, I actually disagree with Evan. I think Evan was saying he hopes that people hold him to the same standard that they hold Josh Allen. I think more recently, Lamar Jackson has been getting painted that narrative of, oh, he doesn't perform in the playoffs. I mean, I'm seeing people put James Harden in Lamar Jackson jerseys and post that as memes on Twitter right now and like in my group messages because people keep pointing to how Lamar hasn't shown. They're putting James Harden in there. Like that's how much of a choker they're calling Lamar Jackson right now. So I think that narrative is slowly changing. And the reality is, neither of those guys have beaten Patrick Mahomes, and neither of those guys have made the Super Bowl from the AFC, right? So I think there's fair criticism both ways. I think there's also over criticism both ways. So putting all that aside, Lamar had 2 turnovers. Yeah, they probably won this game if he doesn't, but I think he did everything he needed to do in that second half to redeem himself. The Mark Andrews fumble was brutal, and also we're talking about the 2-point conversion, but under duress, Lamar Jackson made some ridiculous plays to get that ball to the end zone to score that touchdown. So I can cut him a little bit of slack. Yes, you're right. He did double pump. He could have made an easier, more accurate throw. But you're an NFL tight end who is, and it's not like you're some run of the mill second string NFL tight end. Like you are one of the premier tight ends. I recognize you didn't have a great season, but you were making some big catches this game outside of that fumble. That is a ball you have to catch, man. Like it makes me sick to my stomach to see them have that drive. And it makes me even more sick to my stomach because I think people are not recognizing how important Mark Andrews has been to this Ravens franchise and to Lamar Jackson since he stepped foot on that field because he is truly a great player. And unfortunately, he just had an awful second half. But he's got to catch that ball, and that game should have gone to overtime. Yeah, it could have been a better throw from Lamar, but he had almost a perfect second half outside of that throw. Like he did everything he could have done to bring them back in. And they probably, if they convert that, my money would have been on the Ravens to win that game because they had all the momentum and their defense was playing better. And like you said, Josh shouldn't have any like major plays or significant moments that like necessarily scared me from him against the Ravens. He did what he needed to do to win. But yeah, I'm just not going to like, this is actually one of those games where I criticize Lamar less because I feel like throughout the course of the game, he got better. Whereas in other playoff games in the past, my concern was he never really like elevated throughout the course of it. So it's a weird one for me. Like I recognize he doesn't make the turnovers. They probably win that game. But if he is an improvisational, as Zach mentioned, and doesn't make those crazy plays in the second half, they probably don't win that game either. So it is what it is.
Yeah, I just think we've kind of proven over the last couple of years like how you win in the playoffs. You cannot make mistakes. Yeah. These teams are so good, and it's more important that you don't make mistakes than that you make big plays. Like again, we talk about ad nauseum with the Chiefs. That's how they win. Like they don't try to make big plays. They just do not make mistakes. And all 4 teams that won this weekend, they pretty much just did not make any mistakes. All get penalties too. The Ravens tend to get a lot of penalties. All 4 teams that won this weekend won the penalty battle. They won the turnover battle and they won the penalty battle. You just can't make mistakes. And every time the Ravens have lost in the playoffs, Lamar has made mistakes. And I agree, he was spectacular in most points of this game, but he made the mistakes and Josh didn't. And the other point I do want to make is we need to shout out the Bills defense because the reason the Ravens didn't run the ball as much in the first half is because the Bills defense made crazy adjustments from the last time they played. A lot of that was getting 3 key players, including Matt Milano, who I love back. Mm-hmm. But they were shutting down the run in the first half. That's why the Ravens didn't stick to it because like they were getting behind the sticks. And like by the third quarter, like the Ravens really started to impose their will as they usually do. But that's why. So shout out McDermott, and I don't even know who their defensive coordinator is, but they deserve a lot of credit for adjusting their game plan. I thought that was going to be the key to this game is if they could adjust their game plan from the first time they played Baltimore, and they did just that, and it got them over the hump. So,
also shout out James Cook. Like he's lethal. I've never given him credit. So you've given him a lot of credit. I'll give you credit for giving him credit, but I really think he's special. I mean, just the way he runs, he's got like this. I've always treated him as an outside stretch back that can never take 20 carries a game. And boy, was I wrong about that because he can run inside the tackles. He's not afraid to lower the boom. He actually reminds me of Jahmyr Gibbs a little bit. And I don't think he's at the level of Jahmyr Gibbs, but he reminds me of him in the sense of he can run in and out of the tackle, and he's so quick and versatile. So he's such an integral part of this offense, and I just never really given him credit this whole season, despite the fact that he has almost 20 touchdowns this season.
Ty Johnson too. Yeah, Ty Johnson too has stepped up and had a really nice role for the last few weeks. So, anyways,
I think specifically with James Cook, he's probably like capable of being a 3-down back. Like one of the handful of guys that's capable of being a 3-down back, but it's nice for them to have that change of pace too. But yeah, James is probably maybe the most, maybe not anymore, but throughout the course of the season, it's probably been the most underrated back in the NFL. They don't succeed the way they do without him. He's just been so pivotal for them, along with Josh Allen. So yeah.
And closing on the Bills, I want them to make a Super Bowl so bad. This fan base is just unmatched across the league.
Yeah.
Like, obviously their passion is like on the same tier as other teams, but their like generosity and just like they're just positive. Like, it's like the Eagles fans are unbelievably passionate, but they're like jerks. Like I saw like the Bills fans like were organizing like whether it be a GoFundMe or like a charity donation for Mark Andrews' favorite charity. Like after that, because like he was of all the stuff he was getting from his own fans, like they're just unbelievable. And like inject Mr. Brightside in the fourth quarter into my veins while they're playing in the snow, like any day of the week, man. I want all the success for them, and I love Josh too. So we'll see if they can get it done. I guess maybe it's a good way to pivot into.
I think we start with the AFC matchup because I want to talk about your Commanders last there. So that's a good one. Zach, you want to go first on this one? What are you thinking of? What do you think about this game, and who do you think takes it?
Yeah. All right. So just okay. So we want to talk about the 6:30 game first before the 3:30.
We want to talk Bills Chiefs first. I think we saved the Commanders.
Okay, we'll talk Bills Chiefs first. All right, so the spread is -2 Kansas City and Arrowhead. I believe this wholeheartedly. And to refute what I'm about to say, the consistent claim is going to be, oh, well, I can't bet against the Chiefs because they've done this for X, Y, and Z years in the past, and they're just a well-oiled machine in the playoffs. I get it, but every team is a little bit different. Every roster is a little bit different. You can't just say, hey, they're going to be there's going to be the same exact result because it's happened year over year. Give me the Bills and give me -10 for the Bills. So that is going to be my alt spread adjustment. All right. And I'm going to post the receipts. If you want good odds, Bills -10. They are going to bludgeon the Kansas City Chiefs. And Mahomes throwing his hands up in the air and all these things. There are consequences for those actions in dire times, and the Bills are thirsty for that Super Bowl. They not only deserve it, Josh Allen with his without making any turnovers, which is what he's been a proven epitome of all season long, is going to show Mahomes what a true quarterback that can dominate is going to be. And I've got the Bills winning, and I guess in this case, covering this Bills +2 or Bills money line, I guess I should say.
I love it. I love it. That is just outlandish to think that the Bills are going to win by more than 10. But I honestly don't know how you can possibly like make like a true like deep with analysis pick on this game. That's how close these teams are for me. Like, you can obviously like just pick the Chiefs because they always win, which is probably the most logical thing to do. But I also think this Bills team, like I mentioned earlier, like they found a way like to just eliminate any mistakes, kind of like the Chiefs do, to where they're almost on the same level in that sense. And like they're destined to do it one of these years. But I also think the Chiefs are gunning so hard for a 3-peat, and I picked them to win the Super Bowl before the season and double down to go into the playoffs. I don't know how you can like possibly pick this game. I think it's so even. So give me Buffalo +2. I don't know if they're going to win. Maybe the Chiefs win by 1 and I get that cover, but I think these are dead even teams. The Chiefs are at home. I think the spread is perfect. Give me Buffalo +2. I'm going to say that this is the year. I know I picked the Chiefs and I said I wasn't going to, but I had a feeling I would get sucked in by this point. My love for the Bills. Give me Buffalo to win. I wouldn't take the money line. I'm going to take the 2 points But I'll say, just for sake of making a pick 'em, that the Bills win. Give me under 47.5. I think this is just two teams, kind of more of a rock fight. That teams just don't want to make mistakes, and ends up being a lower scoring game than we're used to with these two teams. But I'm jumping ship on the Chiefs, just more so because I love the Bills, probably.
I wasn't expecting you to switch up picks, but that's okay. I respect that. What I think is hilarious is Zach started this take with, I know what the rebuttal is going to be. People are going to say, oh, the Chiefs have always won this, so they're going to say it again. Well, by that logic, what the hilarious and the hypocrisy that Zach just mentioned is if I just copy and paste this take every week for the Chiefs for like the last every playoff game with the exception of the Texans one, if I just copy and pasted exactly what he said last year for the Bills game, for the Ravens game, and for the Super Bowl, and just pasted it into this one, would be the exact same thing he just said right now, which would be, oh, just because they beat the team the last week doesn't mean we should pick them this week, and then ends up picking the other one. So I honestly think I'm going to go back and watch the podcast last year and compare exactly what you said. Because
watch it this year. Watch it this year. What happened this year?
What happened this year, Zach?
You picked the Kansas City Chiefs to win, and they lost. And I was warning you. Yes.
Are you proud of the fact that you picked the team that's won in the regular season year over year? The Bills have beaten the Chiefs in the regular season last year too. And you know who won in the playoffs? The Chiefs. Oh, you know where they won it? In Buffalo. Oh, and you know what happened? They were a worse team. They chose to lose that game in Buffalo. And guess what happened? They beat them, just like you said they weren't going to.
You're literally picking the Buffalo example for this year. So if you want to take that logic that you just said, then you're essentially saying the Buffalo Bills are going to beat the Chiefs.
No, I never said that. I mean, I think you're putting words.
They're not favored, and they're playing away in Arrowhead. You literally just said, the Chiefs won in Buffalo, and they weren't favored.
My point is you're comparing regular season to playoffs. You know what you're doing. The funny part to me is the Bills have won in the regular season on multiple occasions. They've never beaten the Chiefs in the playoffs. But that's not the point. It's not about whether they've won in prior years or not. It's the notion that you're making it seem like because they've won in prior years shouldn't be the reason we should pick them this year. And you're making it seem like the Chiefs have not been an exceptional team this year. That's the part that cracks me up. They haven't, Zach? How many games have they lost this year?
Look at the points per game that's scored for Buffalo compared to Kansas City.
It's honestly
look at the margin of victory. Look at the plus
minus. It's honestly
minus.
blasphemy at this point, and I'm sure someday you'll get it right because you've been wrong every single time against the Chiefs in the playoffs. But that's okay.
Prior years.
I'm sure you'll get it right one of these days because at some point they're bound to lose the game. But I'm not going to be nice about this take because the reality is you went against me last year without my approval, and that's okay. And you talked all this shit, and then you ended up being wrong. And
it wasn't just me.
I've been able to slide off of this thing so easily and just leave you hanging, bro.
I suckered Evan just like I did to you tonight.
I think it was probably actually me too that initiated that.
It doesn't matter. Zach, for the most part, has been the catalyst of the hate against the Chiefs, which is what I find hilarious. And I think Zach is very much a pick with the heart, pick with the gut, which is normally I respect a lot. But with the Chiefs specifically, I think more often than not, you say we throw logic out the window. I think with the Chiefs, you tend to throw the logic out the window more is the argument I'm making. Because you want desperately for them to lose. And I don't blame you for that because I recognize why, as a fan of other teams, you wouldn't root for the Chiefs. The only reason I'm such a big Chiefs fan is because I love Mahomes and I want him to surpass Brady as the GOAT. If anything, it's my dislike for Brady. It's my dislike for Brady that made me such a big Mahomes fan because I love watching him win. But getting back to the analysis, by your logic, I'm not going to take the Bills beat the Chiefs this year. They beat them in Buffalo. And that's why they deserve credit. My thing is, if the Chiefs win this game, like I know we're having our heated debate or whatever, I don't blame you for picking the Bills because I full well recognize they can win this game. I think Josh Allen, this has been his best season ever. Maybe not numbers-wise, but in terms of what he has meant for his team. And as Evan mentioned, not trying to do too much, trying to convert when it matters. And that's why I don't think it's weird or crazy at all for people to think the Bills are going to win this game, even if you said they'd win by a touchdown. I do think saying that they're going to go into Kansas City and win by over 10 is blasphemy, though, because the point that I'm trying to make is the team that wins the close game all year long, even if they lost to Buffalo, they've not lost a single other game all year in their own house with Andy Reid, with Eric Spagnuolo coaching. This is not a team that's going to take time to go practice celebrations. That's not how they operate. This is a team that even though Buffalo has never won in the playoffs against the Chiefs, you could argue that even though Buffalo has never won in the playoffs against the Chiefs might want this game more. Like, that's what their MO is. They want a three-peat so badly, and you can see it. Like, they are desperate to win week after week. That's what makes them elite, in my opinion. And the difference that I think it comes down to, and it's as simple as this, it's not a talent thing. I actually think Buffalo is plenty talented. It's not a quarterback thing. I would pick Patrick Mahomes over anyone any day of the week, but Josh Allen is a very close second in terms of the tier ranking. It's a coaching thing. I am taking Andy Reid, and more importantly, I'm taking Eric Spagnuolo at their house against the team coming into their house, especially after they lost earlier in the year. Because if there's one thing the Chiefs, especially Andy Reid, does well, is adjust. And I think what's going to happen is they're going to come into Arrowhead, and it's not going to be this quick, high-scoring game. This is going to be a defensive battle early. And I said the whole time, the one thing the Chiefs do better than everyone else is as the game progresses, they pick up momentum and they make the one play that makes a difference. Last week was Patrick Mahomes falling forward as he threw a perfect ball directly into Travis Kelce's chest. It's those kinds of plays that I think are going to make the difference, and I think that's why the Chiefs win. I don't think this is going to be a blowout. I think it's going to be a great game, and I think even if the Chiefs win it, it might be by like a field goal or a touchdown. I just think that that's what makes them dangerous. No matter how close the game is, they find a way at the end to win, and if Mahomes has that ball last, they win. If Josh Allen has that ball last, maybe the Bills win. I just get the feeling Mahomes is going to have that ball last, as he tends to do in the playoffs, and I think that's the difference. I don't think picking the Bills is crazy at all, though. This is one of those like matchups where I totally agree with Evan. I couldn't blame anyone for picking either side, but I'm not picking against the Chiefs, not because they've won in prior years, but because of what they've done this season and how consistent they've been throughout the course of the year. That's my reason for picking the Chiefs.
This is such a great game. Like, it's such a great game. Like, you can't ask for much more than this. Like, I truly believe that there's no like single advantage. Coaching is a good call out. I hate Sean McDermott. I do not think that guy is a big game coach. And the Chiefs have a defensive edge, but like all the things, like both these teams want it equally as much. Like there's no advantage there. Both of these teams are like going to come at it completely professionally. Like they're not going to be, there's no distractions. Like it's just something that's going to be decided on the field, which is beautiful. And hopefully not by McDermott. But I'd like to think maybe McDermott's gotten a little better. Like I said, I thought he had a really good game against Baltimore, but we'll see.
The only thing I want to say on that is statistically, you bring a lot of stats up. Statistically, Mahomes had a worse year than Aaron Rodgers. And statistically, the Bills have scored 100 more points this season than the Kansas City Chiefs. They've also had close wins, but they've had bigger wins. They blow teams out. They're able to score more than 30 points a game. Like the fact that you think that you would take still Mahomes over Josh Allen, to me, is wild. Because Josh Allen relies on his defense to bail him out for another 2019 victory. Josh Allen's too busy scoring 35 points, going dumb on opponents rushing and passing wise.
Zach, I'm one of these days you're going to hit on one of these takes, and I'm going to be very happy for you because you have shit on Mahomes for basically like 3 years, and I hope one of these days you're right so I don't have to come out here every single week and roast you after the fact for picking against the Chiefs in the playoffs and being wrong, which admittedly you've done many times. But the point that bothers me isn't you giving Josh Allen credit, because I think Josh Allen is an elite quarterback. The point that bothers me is you bringing up Patrick Mahomes having worse stats than Aaron Rodgers. All that does is make you look like you have bad takes, because the reality
is true.
Who cares? Why does that matter? Patrick Mahomes is...
You're saying that I'm wrong about what am I wrong about the point differential? What am I wrong about the stats stuff? You're a stats guy.
Why does that matter when one of the guy who has the worst stats than Aaron Rodgers is hosting a home game in the AFC Championship and has won multiple years? If you care about statistics, Zach, then go ahead and care about statistics. I care about winning right now, and the guy that's been winning is the one that had worse statistics than Aaron Rodgers. That's just a ridiculous take. What does that have to do with the current playoff environment? Like, Evan just sent it in the group earlier. Actually, it was you who sent it in the group earlier. What did your boy Josh Allen do last week? He scored 100. He threw for 150 yards, and his team won the game. And you sat here and gave him credit for being a well-oiled machine for having thrown for 150 yards.
He had 3 touchdowns.
Who gives a shit? Patrick Mahomes won last week too. But you want to take that away from him because he also threw for the same amount of yards and had 2 touchdowns. But, it's Mahomes. Like, he doesn't throw for as much week over week, so it doesn't count. I just think that's so ridiculous. You comparing him to Aaron Rodgers right now just makes no sense. Like, you're just doing it to create some sort of stir the pot a little bit. And
I'm using it to stir the pot a little bit, but I'm not
you're
wrong
using it
with
to stir
that
the pot
stat.
completely. I think that's ridiculous. Who cares if the Bills blow teams out by 30? They weren't the 1 seed for a reason. The Chiefs outplayed. The Chiefs ended up having the better record. It's as simple as that.
Well, I think here's my point: is I don't think there's anything wrong with betting on the Bills to win this game because you think they're the better team, and I think we can all agree on that. So
we can all agree on what?
That I think that the Bills are a much better team than the Chiefs.
I think we can all agree that you think the Bills are a better team. Do not try to tell me that I agree to think the Bills are a better team.
The Bills are a better offense. The Bills are a much better offense than the Kansas City Chiefs.
Even if you want to argue the Bills are a better offense, you might be, even if you're right about that, even if I agree with you, do I think the Bills overall are a better team? No, I do not. I think the Chiefs are the better team. I wholeheartedly believe that. I'm not just saying that to say it. I'm saying it because their defense is significantly better than the Bills defense, in my opinion, as good as the Bills defense is. And offensively, the gap isn't that much. And if you ask me which quarterback I believe in more, I believe in Patrick Mahomes more because he consistently wins. It's crazy to me that you're trying to convince me that I think one team is better than the other. That's just ridiculous to me. That's a ridiculous argument.
Admittedly, you struck a chord because it is very emotional for me. I need the Chiefs to win this one.
You need the Bills to win this one.
Oh my gosh, yeah, sorry. I need the Bills to win this one. I just cannot stand seeing the Chiefs happy, especially because of Mahomes' antics in the last game. You got Caitlin Clark in the press box. You got Taylor Swift. You got all these people doing TikTok videos in the back. I'm sick of it. Give me the Bills, please.
I don't care for any of that either, to be honest with you. All I care about is great football, and I know when great football when I see it, and all the Chiefs do is play great football. So that's all I'm saying.
I'm debating a switch. I think there's a logical path to say that either of these teams is the better team, so I have no issue with anyone saying they think the Bills are the better team. But it's almost like they're maybe the better team than the Chiefs in the way that I described the Ravens as by the end of that game against the Bills having been the better team, but they still made the mistakes in the key moments, which is what the Chiefs never do. But I think it's so even. I agree with Cy. There's a coaching edge and a defense edge, which is pretty huge. I don't have a big edge in the quarterbacks, but and I do like the Bills' offense better. So I might predict a full arc here, and this is tricky because I can't really go with my heart because I think depending on what happens in the Commanders game, what I want to happen in this will change. If the Commanders lose, I'm going to root for the Bills to win the Super Bowl. But if the Commanders win, I don't know if I want to root against the Bills in the Super Bowl, and I think it would be way cooler for the Commanders to knock off Pat Mahomes from his three-peat in the Super Bowl. So I might selfishly be rooting differently depending on how the Commanders do. But my arc might change to the Chiefs winning this game again, and then if the Chiefs get their three-peat, then next year they meet again, but this time the Bills have reloaded after they've kind of cleared some of the cap that they had issues with this year after letting Diggs go, and they have way more weapons on offense, and the Chiefs don't have that same edge to get a forfeit. They just won't, and I think the Bills maybe get over the hump next year. So
that's maybe a wild take because that's confirming everything Cy just said. That's confirming everything Cy said.
Welcome back, Evan. You know what I think was the pivotal moment when Zach mentioned that Patrick Mahomes has worse statistics than Aaron Rodgers. I think that's when Evan knew he picked the wrong side.
I'm trying to get things right, and I'm patting myself on the back because my analysis on those 4 divisional round games could not have been more spot on. I think I pretty much nailed how each of those games was going to go, with slight exceptions in the Commanders game. But I'm trying to get things right here, as opposed to going with my heart. And I picked the Chiefs at the beginning of the year to win the Super Bowl, so I'm sticking with the Chiefs. Chiefs -2, under 47.5.
You're sticking with the Chiefs. You mean you're flip-flopping to the Chiefs, you traitor.
I flip-flopped in this episode, but I'm sticking with the Chiefs -2, 47.5, but the Bills knock off the Chiefs next year and get over the hump, and it's really emotional and awesome. All right, that's my pick.
Welcome back, Evan. Welcome back. I do want to make one thing clear. Yeah, I assume you think I picked it. I think Zach assumes I pick the Chiefs every week because of my heart. No, I pick the Chiefs every week because that's my gut too. That's a team that just wins. It doesn't. I don't need my heart to tell me a guy who's 16-2 in the playoffs and hasn't lost a game in the playoffs in 3 years is capable of winning this game at home. That's not my heart. That's me just making a smart decision. But
can we quickly point out, though, obviously we're at an hour 10 and probably we'll talk about the Commanders game a good bit, but I do want to laugh at the fact that the Chiefs taking that safety at the end of the game caused like people that got the bet in late to not cover. Like that completely flipped the betting result. Not for us because we got it in early when it was 8.5, but by the end of the game it closed at 9.5, and the the Chiefs took that safety to go from what I guess 11 to 9 was the final outcome, and it was like that was just the most ridiculous. I mean, it was. I have no issue with the strategy of it, but it's just hilarious when things like that happen. Bad beat.
I thought that was
Bad
so
beat.
funny.
Commanders Eagles NFC Championship battle for the NFC East. Who's going first? I'm going last. So
Go ahead, Zach.
I'll go because I think you guys are going to disagree with this one too. But I've got very polarizing takes. I mean, the Bills minus 10 alt spread is a pretty wild take, but I'll give you another one. I think that the Eagles win by double digits. Give me the Eagles minus 10. They're going to control the game. Their defense is going to cause some problems. They're going to rush Jaden's going to be rushed like he hasn't seen all season. This team is healthy, and I just think that they're going to control the line of scrimmage. They're going to be the ones, the Eagles, that are going to go on these 17, 92-yard drives, as opposed to the Commanders. Albeit their success has been amazing at controlling the game clock. But I just think that Philly's going to come out. They're going to run the ball down their throat, and they're going to control the game. Give me a big game for A.J. Brown. I think A.J. Brown has slid a little bit, and that presumably so has affected Jalen's stats and his overall productivity. They can't rely on the run too much because the Washington will probably try to take that away and stack a bunch of people in the box. But give me a big game for A.J. Brown. He hasn't had one in a while, and it's going to be pivotal for Philadelphia's success for him to have a good game before the Super Bowl. Because if they can't get away with this strategy forever where they run 90% of their plays to either Saquon or Jalen. So give me the Eagles big, and I'm curious to see what you guys think about that.
What's the spread? Out of curiosity,
minus 6.5.
So that's not that bold of a take to say they're going to win by 10.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I hate saying this because I obviously want to. I shouldn't say it. I don't like making this pick. I'm not a fan of this pick because I obviously am going to be happy for you, and in a way, I'm going to be rooting for you, Evan, rooting for my uncle and my cousin and everyone who has been diehard Commanders fans forever. So obviously, I hope I'm wrong, right? As much as I love Saquon and everything else, but I have to pick the Eagles if I'm going again with gut and not heart, and I'm going based off prior matchups. I don't think Zach's take is ridiculous. I don't think it's ridiculous at all. If they won by double digits, it wouldn't shock me. I don't think they will, purely because I just think Jaden is too capable of making a big play at the end and keeping it close. But the reality is, this is where the reasons that I believe Detroit would win that game are the reasons I think the Eagles will win this game. And that's mainly because in this instance, the defense is way better than the Detroit Lions defense. And I think the Eagles defense compared to the Commanders defense is on a different level. And that's not disrespect to the Commanders defense. It's just that they're just not nothing about their defense is elite to me. And whereas the Eagles you were talking about rushing 4 against Shaden Daniels, the Eagles can do that. You know what I mean? They can do that, and they have a multitude of corners that can provide coverage. You're not going to completely shut down Terry McLaurin, but you can definitely give him different looks and make it a little bit more complicated for him. And you're going to need guys like De'Ami Brown to have massive games for you guys to make a difference. I also don't think in a game like this, Brian Robinson is going to be amazing, or even Eckler for that matter. I think the Eagles will do a good job of slowing that down. So it's just going to put a ton of pressure on Jaden on the road in a ruckus environment. Meanwhile, offensively, I think the best player on either team in this game, to no one's surprise, is Saquon Barkley. And I think if the Commanders decide, hey, let's stack the box, that'll be a mistake, because then you have Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown running against one-on-one against corners that they could beat at this stage of their career pretty much every other play. And then if you take the outside away, Saquon Barkley is just going to eat that defense alive. Mm-hmm. And this isn't even factoring in Jalen Hurts scrambling and running for yards too. I just think I looked at the two matchups you guys had this year. The playoffs are different. You guys have more momentum. So maybe there's a world where the momentum carries over. You beat them in the house. But even in that second game with Jalen Hurts hurt and Kenny Pickett playing, the Eagles still almost won that game because they have a good idea of how I don't know how your offense likes to run, but at least your personnel, I think. And I think that's really what it comes down to. So that's why I picked the Eagles. I hope I'm wrong, though. I hope Jaden continues to prove me wrong, and I hope you guys go into their house and beat them. I also would be so happy to see Phil. I don't, root for people's downfall, but I want so badly for you guys to go beat the Eagles in Philadelphia, not because I don't like their players. I actually really like their players, but because I can't stand their fans, and I would love to see them flip out and get all emotional over losing to a division rival in their house. It would be hysterical. So I hope that happens. I'm sorry that was long-winded, but that's what I have to say. Go ahead, Evan.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with some of your points and disagree with others. I guess I'll start with the prior matchups. The first matchup would have been kind of what Zach described, where I agree the Eagles dominated them, specifically on the ground. The offense for the Commanders struggled. That was kind of in the period where Jaden was like a little bit broken this year, though. Like after the rib injury where he lost practice time, and Fangio is really tough on young quarterbacks too, so I'll give him a lot of credit in that game. And then the second matchup was so weird. I disagree. Obviously they did almost win that game even without Hurts, but the reason they almost won that game is because the Commanders probably played their worst half of the season in the first half of that game, which I don't even think had much to do with the Eagles. Like they turned the ball over 5 times in that game, which was 2 Brian Robinson fumbles, a De'Ami Brown fumble, and then a really uncharacteristic Jaden Daniels interception as well. And they still won that game. The second half, the Commanders offense was just like could not be stopped by even that sick Eagles defense. Obviously, like it helps that the Eagles were like going 3 and out a lot of the time and helping with short fields. But like, I really think the Commanders figured out something in that second game to where I don't necessarily think the first game is a great representation of how this is going to go. I think the game plan, I think for the Commanders, actually, I agree with you, Sai, is like almost let Saquon eat. Like, because Saquon, even if you stack the box, Saquon is going to have 100 yards in this game. Like, you cannot stop him. With that offensive line, he's unstoppable. It's almost like Jokic in the NBA. It's like, we can't stop him. All right? We just have to deal with it. But the thing you cannot let happen is you cannot let Saquon go off, which he's going to, and then you cannot let Jalen Hurts beat you. The pass offense for Philly looks terrible. I think Jalen Hurts, he got really dinged up in that last game. I think he's playing through something pretty serious right now. Like, potentially a sprained like MCL type injury, and he's just sucking it up. Like that's the vibe I'm getting from them. So I don't think you're going to have the level of mobility he had. And even with that, the last 2 games, AJ Brown doesn't look right. Their pass game just does not look good at all. So I think the game plan for the Commanders is like, obviously you can't let Saquon go for 250 like the Rams have done. Like obviously you can't let that happen, but like let Saquon get his 125 yards on 25 carries, 4 or 5 yards a carry, and just do not let Jalen Hurts beat you through the passing game. And I think they can do that. Like Lattimore looked great last week. I'd imagine they might go more man-to-man, which was a problem with Mike Evans. So we'll see how that plays out. But Sanders still on Devontae Smith. So I think that game plan can work as if you just bend, don't break. Let Saquon have his 100 yards. And I think they can stop Jalen Hurts. He got sacked 7 times last week. They did not look comfortable. Obviously, the snow is a big factor in all this, but I think that's a game plan that can work, and I feel good about the offense. Obviously, it's not going to be the same. The biggest issue, obviously, is Sam Cosmi, our best offensive lineman, tore his ACL, and that's the guy on the interior that would be lining up across Jalen Carter, who, obviously you have Saquon and Daniels, 2 elite players in the sport. That's another one of the best defensive players in football. But with how Kingsbury moves the line and Jaden getting the ball out quick, I think they can compensate for that barely enough. Obviously, I'm very biased in this, but I'm going to say something I've never said in my entire life before, gentlemen. I think the Washington Commanders are going to the Super Bowl, or the Washington Redskins, the Washington football team. Never at one point at any season, even before the season, Robert Griffin III going into the next year, did I think they had a team that could make it to the Super Bowl. But I genuinely think they're going to go into Philly and knock them off. I think Jalen Hurts is going to be really iffy from a health standpoint. And I think that game plan I mentioned can work, and Jaden Daniels is going to shock the world. The Eagles people don't think it's possible. They are doing exactly what all the Lions people said and giving us no chance to win this game, but divisional rival too, anything can happen. I think they're going to go in there and they're going to win. They're going to make the Super Bowl. I know I'm biased for that, but I think they're going to do it. I just got a feeling about this team. So
I love it, though. I love it. I think you can do it. So I don't want to take that away. But I do want to say one thing. I think Zach made a really good point. I think A.J. Brown for the last couple weeks has not the best games ever. But in the second half of last week, the reason the Eagles won that game isn't just Saquon. He made a couple big catches and big moments to convert first downs from Jalen Hurts. Mm-hmm. And I think that's some momentum that he's going to carry into this game. I just don't know how you might be right. I think the difference will be if Jalen Hurts is healthy or not. He took a big hit at the end of last game too. And he didn't really have to play again after that. So we don't know how bad that was. But you're right. If he's hurt, then I think you're way more accurate. But if he's like even marginally healthy, I just don't know how you stop their offense relative to how their defense will play against you guys. It's just a big. I just think their defensive edge is much larger relative to yours. Because what we're talking about. You're right. If Saquon goes for 120 and AJ Brown and Terry McLaurin, or not Terry McLaurin, AJ Brown and Devontae Smith have under 100 yards receiving, you probably have a good chance of winning that game. But if you don't stack the box, the odds that Saquon doesn't go for more than 120 is actually very minimal. Now, the guy's line last week was 120. That's how ridiculously good he is right now.
Well,
his
because he usually pops an 80-yard run. So that's the thing you need to avoid, which he usually does. But that's the one you want to avoid because that really jacks up his lines. But the other thing about the Eagles' defense is you can run on them a little bit. Like the Bucs defense, for example, is a way better run defense than the Eagles defense. They're mainly better in the secondary. So, I mean, they're still a solid run defense, but like Brian Robinson, how he looked in that last game was huge. I cannot understate how big that was. So I think they can run the ball a little bit, which will help. Run it directly at Jalen Carter. And the other key thing, this is exactly what I mentioned last week. The Commanders basically run no huddle the entire game. And if you need to slow down a pass rush, that is the best way to do it. You keep all those guys on the field. You run no huddle the entire game. You keep the crowd out of it. That's exactly what they did in Detroit. And I think that makes it really hard to stop. And that is how they're going to have to slow down the pass rush. But I agree. The big matchup there is, I think the two, it's whoever plays right guard where Cosme would normally be trying to stop Jalen Carter. Obviously, that's a huge one. And if it does turn into I don't know how schematically is best to play the Eagles pass game, but if it is a lot of man-to-man with Lattimore and A.J. Brown, obviously that's going to be huge. I know Lattimore played great in zone last week and then did not play great in man on Mike Evans 2 weeks ago, but he didn't play in the last two. It was Ben St. Juste and Emmanuel Forbes the last two times we played the Eagles. So, if he plays anything close to his capabilities and, A.J. Brown not looking too good lately, I think that's another huge matchup as well. So it's going to be interesting.
No disrespect to Commanders, but Zach, I have a question for you. If Marshawn Lattimore and Ben St. Juste go man-to-man against A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, what do you think their lines are going to be in that game?
St. Juste isn't going to play. St. Juste isn't playing. He's not. He played before.
To see how Lattimore fares off against A.J. Brown. Lattimore's kind of a dog. I like Lattimore. I mean, he drops hits. I mean, he played really well. To Evan's point, he played really well. He did exactly what the Commanders needed him to do in that Detroit game. Well, so and I'm curious.
I actually I suspect it's going to be more zone, and they might do what they did to Detroit. The Commanders typically prefer to play man, but usually when they do that against the Eagles, obviously they've never had that elite corner. It's usually St. Juste and Forbes, which obviously neither of them will be participating in this game. So I suspect it might be, and maybe just like right now, like with where Lattimore's at after the season and being hurt with the hamstring, like he's just not the same level of player with the being able to man up on these guys. So I suspect it might be more of a zone heavy scheme, which again, that was why basically they beat Detroit, forcing those interceptions and giving them a different look. So you're going to see both, but I don't think it's going to be a lot of just 1v1 on these guys.
The problem sorry, go ahead, Zach, if you have a
no, all you.
I was going to say the problem that I see with it, everything I'm saying, I hope I'm wrong about. So this is like very awkward for me, but the problem I see with it is Marshawn Lattimore played a good game in zone, and I respect that. Marshawn Lattimore in his prime, when he was on the Saints, was incredible. We're talking about one of the best corners in the NFL. He's not that anymore, and especially in man coverage. I mean, we talked about Mike Evans. A.J. Brown is better than Mike Evans. He might be coming off a couple bad games, but A.J. Brown is in like closer to the prime of his career than Mike Evans is. You give A.J. Brown that matchup, I think he will eat if you go man-to-man. You might be right. They might sit zone, but the difference between Philly and Detroit is you were talking about Detroit not being ready and Detroit being a bit presumptuous about it. I don't think the Eagles are going to have the same approach because the Eagles just made the Super Bowl 2 years ago. They know what it takes to get there. So I think the experience level is different. And I think some of the veterans, guys like Brandon Graham and people like that on their team are going to have them ready. So I just think and the other thing is, you just said it perfectly. Offensive line is going to be such a game changer in this game. And that Phillies O-line, especially with running the football, is just so ridiculously good. I feel for John and the boys, but they're going to have their hands full this week. I hope I'm wrong, man. I would love to see John Allen get some massive play stuff in the back or whatever. Watch our guy go to Super Bowl. I just think the Phillies really, it's a complete team. And Hurts doesn't even have to be good. He just has to not make mistakes. I think that will make the difference. If he can complete what's given to him and Saquon Barkley does his thing, the issue is, you're right, he makes a lot of mistakes sometimes. So that's what it comes down to.
Actually, this year he's kind of done that, but I don't think that's enough in this. If the Commanders go with that game plan of like stopping Saquon from like the 80-yard huge plays, or maybe he gets 1 and not 2, but like if the Commanders can just like keep like, let him have his 125, like I don't think that's enough to beat this Commanders offense. Like I think Jalen Hurts is going to have to make a few plays, assuming the Commanders do not turn it over, which they haven't been, but like the Commanders don't turn it over, because I know the Eagles aren't going to turn it over either. They might take a lot of sacks and, maybe Hurts gets a fumble or something like that. But I think that Hurts is going to need to make some plays in this game. And I think the Commanders' approach should be to force him to be the one to beat you in that sense. And I don't think they can just play Chiefs ball and, no turnovers, hand it off every time. I don't think that's enough. I think the Commanders are going to score 3 or 4 touchdowns. Like they're going to need to score.
See, that's where I disagree with you, Ev. I think that Jaden's going to have the game. I think he's going to be the one that struggles. I do. Because I think I think the Philadelphia Eagles are going to command an early lead. Like I would not be surprised if they went up 10-0 or 14-3. And it's going to be up to Jaden Daniels to try to throw himself back in the game. And he is such an accurate quarterback. He's precise and he is calm as anything under pressure. But when you're throwing against an anticipatory defense that has great secondary, that know the ball's coming in the air, and the run game is virtually just meaningless, I do not think Brian Robinson's going to get it going all game. I truly don't, against that defensive line. That's where it's like no fault to Jaden, to him. He's played a great season, but I think he's going to be the one that makes the mistakes because of the position that Washington puts him in this game.
Keep betting against him.
Sorry, go ahead. If Jalen Hurts has 0 turnovers, I think the Eagles are going to win this game. If he does what Jared Goff did, you guys will win this game. That's the way I look at it. That has nothing to do with me not believing in Jaden. That has way more to do with me thinking that the defense of the Eagles has way more of an edge than the defense of the Commanders.
Yeah,
I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but even with Marshawn playing well in zone last week, the defense, like the turnovers, admittedly were like a terrible fumble by Goff in the thing, and then one of his throws were terrible. So it's not like I sat there last week watching the Commanders defense being like, oh my gosh, the Commanders defense is so good. Like if anything, I thought they were average, if not below average. What I thought though was they made the plays when they needed to make them, and Jaden Daniels was the game changer last week. My thing is, he was able to be a game changer against a defense that couldn't do jack against them. I don't think that's going to happen this time, especially because the last time y'all played, you mentioned you guys had a great second half. There was 5 turnovers. You came back, and it ended up being an extremely close game where the Eagles almost won with Kenny Pickett. Jalen Hurts was not playing that game. And say what you will about Jalen Hurts, I'll take Jalen Hurts with a torn MCL playing out there over Kenny Pickett if I'm going to need my team to win a game. I think that's going to be a difference maker there. And I don't think it's like because Saquon is that much of a game changer. If Jalen Hurts has 150 to 200 yards, but Saquon Barkley has 150 yards, the Eagles are going to be putting up plenty of points there.
Yeah.
My point is, like, the Commanders scored 4 touchdowns in the second half of that game, or something like that.
Sure,
3 touchdowns. So there's a chance that they just can't stop them. There's always that chance.
Me and Zach are out there playing offense together, and we can't keep giving 3 and outs. Of course, the other offense is going to go out there and score points. Defense is going to be gas. I think the Eagles do a better job of controlling the clock with Jalen Hurts. Kenny Pickett can't drive the ball in the second half of that game.
He played well in that game, actually.
I mean, but regardless, he can't really move the ball. Like, if you're going to have 3 and outs, defenses are going to eat. It comes down to, can you manage the game and can you keep the ball in your hands? Like, I don't want if Jaden Daniels gets the ball, I don't know, 10 times in the second half. Oh, I guarantee you the Commanders are going to win that game. That's not even a question. My thing is I just don't think that's going to happen. And that's just me speaking analytically, not with my heart.
We'll see. Zach, keep betting against Jaden Daniels. See what happens. You did it last week.
Admittedly, I did too, but
dude, yeah. I've had some very polarizing takes today. I think I showed my true colors for how much I hate the Chiefs.
Yeah, you showed that long ago.
Didn't know that, but man, I fully admitted it, dude. I owned it. That I was like, dude, I just cannot stand Mahomes and company.
I don't know. It's funny because in the grand scheme of things, moving on, I think we'll probably close out here in a minute. But in the grand scheme of things, I can't be mad like if my predictions are wrong though, because like I'm gonna be so happy for Josh Allen. It's not like me picking the Chiefs to win is because I have anything against Josh. It's because I want Mahomes to be the GOAT. But Josh is a stud. The issue is I'm not gonna lie, I've always been critical of his like ability to get over the hump in the playoffs. Like I recognize he's had some great games, but in which they've lost, so it's not always on him. But I still think there's been enough things like Cincinnati coming into his house and beating him. Him winning that Ravens game was a good statement, and now we'll see. Like if he makes a Super Bowl, like how do you root against like Evan said, how do you root against those fans, man? They're literally like they're probably the best fans in any sports like team period. Their commitment to their team paired with like the fact that they're not assholes about it, excuse my language. That's precisely why I hope I'm wrong about the Eagles. The only thing I will say though is the sweet serendipity I will feel if Andy Reid goes to the Super Bowl and beats the Eagles to get his three-peat and wins two out of like the two back-to-back would make me so happy. It would be so beautiful. But it would be a boring matchup to see it again. So
I do not want to see another Chiefs-Eagles Super Bowl. Well, obviously, I'm so biased here that if it's not a Chiefs-Eagles Super Bowl, there's like what does that make it, a 50% chance that the Commanders are in the Super Bowl? But yeah, that would just be brutal. That would be brutal.
But even if the Commanders weren't in the NFC Championship, I'm pretty sure you'd still win one.
No, that's my point. Yeah, I would not want to see that. Yeah, exactly.
I don't either. I want a new matchup.
What's the Super Bowl matchup you guys want to see before we close out? Evan, you first.
Commanders, Chiefs, because if it's
That
the
would be
Bills,
sweet.
and then if the Commanders don't win, I want the Bills and the Eagles.
Okay, sorry.
Commanders, Chiefs. I would love to see Josh Allen there, but I have to root for Mahomes to get his three-peat given my Mahomes stand. But regardless, it would just be epic to see Commanders in there. I'm not rooting for the Eagles fans. Are you kidding me?
I know Zach's answer. Because
Bills, Eagles.
Yeah, Eagles?
Yeah, because I want to see the Commanders go because, Ev, like, Sign, I just love you so much, man, and you deserve this. And I'm cheering for the Commanders, but I don't think the Commanders would stand a chance against the Bills. And I want to see a close football game. And not to be super disrespectful, but I think that the Eagles and the Bills would offer that way more than the Bills and the Skins.
No, I get.
I get his logic, though. I get his logic.
I disagree, obviously, but you
want to see like
from a good football game, like
Well, I think there's two reasons for that too. I think you want to see a matchup that's super fun to watch in the Super Bowl, and I also think we'd all be very happy to pick the Bills in that matchup too, if that happens. So we will definitely have congruence in that situation, and we'll all be actively rooting for the Bills. So that would create the only scenario where we'd all be like very much on the same page.
The rooting element is huge. I'm actually pumped that I can finally I love the Bucks so much, so it was like kind of a bummer that we played them, and then like the Lions, they pissed me off all these little things, but ultimately I love the Lions too and would have been rooting for them. But hey, now I finally have a team I truly despise and can wholeheartedly root against.
You know what's going to be hilarious, though? If we get the Super Bowl that Evan and I want, watching Zach have to, he's obviously not going to want to pick the Chiefs because he can't stand them, but he clearly would want to pick them from a money perspective, so it would be a hilarious, exercise.
That would be.
It would be so funny, man.
I feel like he would have.
I'd thank Patrick Mahomes because he's paying our Riverside bill. I mean, the Chiefs literally made us such a profitable business and endeavor. So I do have to tip the cap to Mahomes.
I'm like, why do you hate them so much? They're basically financing
They're paying my bills.
Super Bowls more than half of our betting account.
I was able to go grocery shopping thanks to Patrick Mahomes. Thank you, sir. I was able to keep my electricity out of my home.
Zach acting like this podcast is his full-time job and pays his actual expenses. Shout out Cooper Kupp and the Rams, though, man. We got a big chunk from those boys 3 years ago. So
that really got us going with that $1,000 free bet or whatever we got. We hit on
and then we went back to $300 net, and then we somehow increased.
we won't disclose the full number to our guests. They're just going to have to tune in. But
let's just say we're making moves. We're making moves.
I don't think they're still watching by this point anyway. So
I won't get ahead of myself. We're a week away from championship games, but people stay tuned because we will have a betting episode after these championship games, specifically about Super Bowl bets, and we will share our MDS betting sheet with y'all. So if you guys want to, we've done pretty well in prior years. I'm not going to say tailless just for that reason, but definitely tail Zach for the heads and tails. We'll bring that up. That's for sure.
All right. That was Mondays Down South.